Good morning, NCC. Welcome to another Quarantine Sunday. I have a question. How long should a courtship last? Or how long do you think a guy should pursue a girl before they end up dating or they end up just concluding they're not meant to be? Well, the shortest in the Bible is a few weeks, but here's one that will last 7 years. And of course, there are circumstances around this story, and this feels so much like a Korean drama. Alright, so we're gonna go straight into the text on this one because it's got so many interesting things happening. But before that, a little bit of a background. So right before Genesis 29, we were in Genesis 27 and 28, and we remember that Jacob actually deceived his father to get the inheritance of his older brother, right? So he wore those very furry clothes that his mom gave him. So he and his mom connived to trick or deceive their dad Isaac so that he would steal the blessing of his older brother Esau. And because of that, Esau began to have this murderous hatred in his heart, and Esau wanted to murder Jacob. And so what happened was Jacob's mom found a way to get Jacob away from the household, okay, away from Esau's murderous hatred and go to Laban. The way was for him to go to Laban, and hopefully Esau would kind of calm down. Now, on his way there, of course, he meets God in a kind of dream, and there we talked about last week Jacob's ladder or Jacob's stairway. All right, and we see that God reminded him of the covenant that God made with Abraham. And so you would think, Jacob, here's this manipulator, deceiver, and he meets God in a dream. But instead of Jacob really praising God and everything, Jacob, instead of worshiping God, gives God a kind of conditional promise. So, in a sense, Jacob was trying to manipulate even God himself. And this is a kind of mockery on God. So today we're going to look at a chapter and see how God kind of responds to everything that Jacob has done. Alright, so let's take a look at Genesis 29 verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And as he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it, for out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large. And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." Now pause for a moment. I know that the Bible here in verse 1 says Jacob went on his journey, but the literal Hebrew words or phrase is Jacob lifted up his feet. Alright, so this means in Hebrew, this is an unusual phrasing in Hebrew, which actually means he was happy. He was excited. There was a skip in his step. You know, when people are so excited and happy, they kind of skip. They kind of do a zippity-doo-dah kind of a dance move walk, like a strut, or Staying Alive of John Travolta. So it's kind of like that. So he was happy. He was excited. He was, there was no reason for him to be sad anymore because he's like, I got the inheritance. I got the blessing. I got the covenant of God. So, I got everything that was supposed to go to my older brother. I escaped his wrath. Plus, I got the covenant of God. What else could go wrong, right? So he's like, king of the world at this point. So he lifted up his feet. He had a skip in his step. He was happy. He was excited. Now, on the flip side, the phrase "people of the East" also implies that these people now, they did not really truly follow or worship Yahweh. They had their own religions. They had their own customs. They had their own thing during that time. So when Jacob asks the shepherds, "Do you know Laban?" and they said, "We know him," in the Hebrew, there's an implication here. It's not like, yeah, we know Laban, great guy, we love him, he's so funny. It's not like that. The "we know him" implies, yeah, we know Laban. Like, you're gonna get to know him too. Like, this guy is not a nice guy. The implication here is that Laban had a bad reputation. He's not a likable person. He's probably swindled a few other people before, and so they're not sure how to talk about Laban to a stranger. I don't want to sound, but what's this called? Angry or bitter or anything like that. But there was a point that, or there's a story about people who play golf. Like here in Cebu City is very, very small. And so your reputation goes around very, very fast. And especially when it comes to exclusive sports clubs. And there's this one guy who got known for cheating in golf. And golf is a game of honesty, and you score yourself. It's not like, for example, swimming, where people know if, who reached the end of the swimming pool first. Or basketball. Everyone can see if the ball went in the hoop or not. With golf, you have to score yourself. It's an honesty policy kind of game. And so, when this guy got found out that he was a cheater at golf, that he would score himself higher than everyone else, even though he didn't deserve it, when word got around, people were like, oh yeah, that guy, yeah, he cheats at this game. And so he began having this really bad reputation. And that is kind of like Laban's reputation during this time. He probably swindled some people already. And what did Jacob do? Jacob said to them, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And see, Rachel his daughter is coming with a sheep." Now what does Jacob do? Jacob says, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." Now, what was happening here? Jacob was trying to get the shepherds away so that he could have solo time with Rachel, so that he and Rachel can talk one-on-one without anybody there. But since the shepherds would not leave, he had to find another way to kind of grab Rachel's attention. So what does he do? While still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, now that's a very important phrase. As soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled a stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Think about this for a moment. Here's Jacob manipulating again. He's back to his old tricks because old habits die hard. His characteristic as a manipulator has resurfaced. First, Jacob wanted to solo Rachel. He was hoping that his agenda would be privately addressed, that no one else would hear what he had to say. That's why he said, "It's not time yet to water the sheep. Go, guys, go and, do your other stuff." He didn't say, "I need to talk to Rachel alone." He was manipulating the situation by looking for other reasons just to get Rachel alone with him. That did not work. What did he do? He timed his actions. The moment he saw Rachel arrive, it wasn't before. He didn't roll the stone by himself. Now, the stone was big. It was heavy. But the Bible doesn't say that it was so heavy no single person could move it. It's just heavy enough that it's exhausting for just one person to move it. Okay? But it's doable. And that's what he does. Now, what did he do? He did something to impress Rachel. He rolled the stone alone. Okay? He rolled the stone alone. Then, he watered the flock of Rachel. Notice he didn't water everyone else's flocks or everyone else's sheep. He just watered the sheep that Rachel brought. Now, obviously, his motivation here, if you look at the other commentaries, his motive here was to get Laban indebted to him. He was doing all these kind acts to get Laban's family to kind of owe him something. Alright? So his manipulative tendencies are showing once more. He made grand gestures and feats of strength to impress Rachel. Then he wanted Rachel's family to be indebted to him. And then he wept aloud. Now this is exaggerated, pretended drama. This isn't sincere weeping. This is drama. How do we know this is drama? Because of the phrase, he lifted up his feet. He was happy. He was excited. He had no reason to feel bad. He had everything going for him. But with Rachel, he played the victim. he was trying to gain sympathy. Now, why did he do all these things? He wanted Rachel on his side. He wanted to somehow impress her and gain her sympathy at the same time. So we pause there and think of the lesson we can get here. Beware and be vigilant of people who exaggerate, who make grand or grandiose gestures, and who do things for show, who crave the spotlight, who try to get sympathy and try to impress others. We are reminded of the Pharisees once more. Remember what Jesus said, beware the Pharisees. They love the spotlight. They love the drama. When they fast, what do? They exaggerate. They tear their clothes. They put on sackcloth. They make themselves look so horrid and tired and hungry. So they exaggerate. And they exaggerate by trying to impress people. Look, I'm fasting. And they try to get the sympathy of people as well. Look, I'm so hungry. Look at me. And they drama. They cry. They weep. Oh God, Lord. But it's all fake. It's all manipulation. It's all deception. That's what Jacob is doing here with Rachel. Now what happens next? Verse 12. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, I love this part, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? So what's happening here? We know Laban. We know this guy. We've met him before. When? We met him when Abraham's servant arrived in their place before. Remember that? And remember what happened? When Laban saw all the bracelets, remember Laban knows that Abraham was super, super rich. Why? Because of all the bracelets and the jewelry, the earrings and the nose rings and all of that stuff that Rebekah wore. If we go back to the past. So Laban knows Abraham is super, super rich. And check it out. Look who's here. Who else? But now it's my nephew. We're related. Jacob's here. So now Laban has a plan of his own. He's a con artist, and he's gonna con Jacob. So now we have a manipulator who's gonna manipulate another manipulator. It's con man versus con man. Oh, the irony of this chapter. Alright, so what does he do? Look at what he says. He hugs and kisses. These are, it's not just what's it called? He did this. It's not the first time we've seen Laban do this. Alright, this whole eagerness to welcome, eagerness to hug and to kiss and to welcome and to say, surely you are bone and my flesh. This is not, like a real rejoicing. This is more like exaggerating things once more. All right. And so we can add to the warning. Beware and be vigilant of people who not only exaggerate and make grandiose gestures, and who do things for show and crave the spotlight, but also beware of those who shower you with gifts, praises, and compliments. Proverbs 29 verse 5 says, a man who flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. Proverbs 26 verses 24 to 28 says this, whoever hates disguises himself with his lips and harbors deceit in his heart. When he speaks graciously, do not believe him, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though his hatred be covered with deception, his wickedness will be exposed in the assembly. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts its rolling. A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. So look at what God actually says here. He says, whoever digs a pit will fall into it. So whoever digs a pit, he himself will fall into that same pit. And a stone will come back on him who starts its rolling. So if you start the rolling of that stone, it's going to fall on you. All right. So in other words, it's going to come back to you. All right. Now we know this, sowing and reaping, but let's continue. Verse 16, Genesis 29:16. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leia, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days, because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. So what do we get from this text so far? Essentially, the term weak eyes, verse 17, Leah's eyes were weak. What does that mean? Weak eyes, or tender eyes in some translations. It means not appealing or not bright. In our day today, eyes that don't really sparkle. You know, like the eye to eye and you're so kilig. Like Leia didn't have that. In other words, she was not as gorgeous or as beautiful as her sister, who the Bible describes was beautiful in form and appearance. So, face and body. So everything, face and body, her like everything about her was just appealing. And so, what does Laban say? Look at how Jacob and Laban discuss things. Jacob says, I'll work for you 7 years. In other words, I'm gonna pay you dowry. But obviously, I don't have money with me right now. I didn't bring money from Abraham or from Isaac. I didn't have baon. So what do? I'm gonna work for you for 7 years so that for free. But actually, that's the dowry. So I'm paying you 7 years worth of wages as dowry. All right? Now, if you think about this, Jacob also gets 7 years far from Esau's murderous hatred. So it's a win-win for Jacob. He's thinking, I'm going to pay 7 years worth of wages for you, and at the same time, I'm escaping the wrath of my older brother Esau for 7 years. Now, Laban makes parinig. Parinig means when you say something to kind of get another, to say something without saying it, making a double message. So Laban said, better to you than any other man. What's he saying? He's saying something like this. My daughter has so many suitors because she's really lovely, and there's so many guys who want to date her, who want to marry her, and so many guys have already approached me wanting me to give my daughter to them. But, I really find that I should give her to you instead because, we're related. And, I kind of like you already, and you're bone of my bone. So yeah, better to you than all these other guys. So he's kind of trying to make Jacob feel that I'm giving you a sweet deal. So Jacob actually is giving Laban a fair offer, okay? 7 years of dowry is kind of like a fair / generous. It's not really fair. It's a generous offer. Okay, so Jacob is giving Laban a generous offer, and Laban is making it sound like, no, I'm the one giving you a favor because I don't have to choose you. There's so many other guys out there, but you should be thankful that I'm choosing you. And so what's happening? Jacob is giving a generous offer. Laban is trying to manipulate the situation and trying to make Jacob feel that it's Jacob who should be indebted to him. So you see the interplay of these two men. They're kind of trying to manipulate / negotiate with one another. But the deal is struck. When he says, stay with me, that is ensuring the deal. But Laban has other plans. Okay? Now notice. The verse says this. Jacob served 7 years, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. What does this mean? It means real love does not keep score. Real love does not keep a list. Real love does not use past kindnesses to guilt trip or to manipulate. Real love does not, in Bisaya, real love does not pamuyboy. But rather, real love is patient. Real love waits for appropriate times and seasons, willing to earn Laban's trust and pay Laban the agreed upon wages, It's not like the impatience of lust. Because lust wants things now. Lust cannot wait. Lust wants to get things without the due diligence, without the appropriate time, without any of those, and it leads to sin, it leads to fornication, it leads to all these other problems in life as well, in addition to the sin and fornication and all of that stuff. So, what happened? Jacob spent 7 years sincerely working hard, expecting a reward that was sincere and, fulfilling for him. What happens? So there's a feast. And then in verse 23, in the evening, Laban took his daughter Leia and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leia to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leia. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" And oh, the irony of ironies. Look at what Laban's response was. Laban said, "It is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." That word, firstborn, that would have resonated with Jacob. That would have struck a chord in Jacob's heart. So what really happened here? Of course, there was a feast, there was wine, there were drinks. Jacob may have been a little tipsy, a little overly happy with the wine. And, during their day, they did not have LED lights. And it was very dark. And they lived in deserts. All right? And so the darkness plus all of that stuff. And during the wedding, Leah probably wore a veil. And so Jacob could not really recognize who his new wife was. And so in the morning, he was shocked. Now, here's what's shocking. There's so many shocking, there's shock after shock after shock, audacity after audacity after audacity, and then here's the climax of it all. Laban plotted for 7 years. This was 7 years of deception. This was 7 years of being double-faced, of 7 years of smiling at Jacob, praising Jacob for his sincere hard work. Good job with the sheep. Good job with, the watering the sheep all the time. I love how these sheep never got sick. Jacob, you're such a great shepherd. Jacob, you're so great at making sure the sheep don't, break their legs. You're protecting them from the lions and all of that stuff. Jacob, I really appreciate you. It's 7 years of being double-faced towards Jacob's efforts, all the while deceiving him. The NET has a comment that I found very interesting. The NET translators notes. They say, "This was a monstrous blow, a masterpiece of shameless treachery. It was certainly a move by which he won for himself far and wide the coarsest of laughter." Coarsest meaning evil. So it's evil laughter. Now, how interesting. The phrase or the word firstborn. This word must surely have struck Jacob's heart. This surely must have made Jacob remember that he deceived his own brother, the firstborn. And so now he's receiving the same thing that he did to his own brother. Again, the NET translators notes says this, quote unquote, "This was God's way of disciplining the deceiver who tricked his older brother." You see, many times people sin against us, and many times we are tempted to make them feel the same pain and hurt that we feel. Whatever hurt or pain that they cause us, we want to cause it back to them just so they know how exactly they made us feel. But that's not our place. We're supposed to leave it to God, because God is the one who will bring discipline or judgment. Discipline for his people, judgment for his enemies. We leave that up to God. God is sovereign. God is in control. And this is some people say, they say, karma. Others will say, you simply get what you deserve, or what's it called? What goes around comes around. But actually, this is a real principle in Scripture called sowing and reaping. God will never be mocked. We will reap what we sow. And look at what happened here. Jacob couldn't really say anything. Verse 27, Laban says, "Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now we're going to stop there, but look at what happened. First, the phrase complete the week. What week? Remember, they had a feast. Their feasts usually lasted for a week, with everyone there and everyone's happy. Now, if the husband, the new groom, the brand new groom, Jacob, refused or rejected Leah, that would have been a grave insult, and this insult would have obliged the brothers, the men of the family, to avenge the honor of Leah by killing Jacob. So it's not like Jacob could argue. This was when Laban says complete the week of this one, it sounds like a negotiation, but this was actually a threat. He's saying, the feast ain't done. You know the custom here. You know that all the guys are here. Complete the week of this one. If you insult us, you know what's going to happen to you. All right? So just don't insult us and take it. Take this deception, take this manipulation, just swallow it all, because you got no choice. Because, complete the week. It was a veiled threat in a sense. So Jacob is now afraid of Esau's wrath back home. He's afraid of the wrath of the men in this household too. So what does he do? Can he go home? No. If he stays here, he has to take it all. Jacob is afraid of Esau's wrath, and now he cannot dare risk the wrath of the men of this household. So Jacob is now caught in a dilemma. He has no choice but to swallow the sin against him, just as he caused his brother to swallow the sin he committed against his brother. In other words, what happened between him and Esau? He did such things, he manipulated things in such a way that his brother had no choice but to take it. His father could not pronounce any blessing anymore because it was given to him. So his brother had no choice but was left with the, blessing / kind of like a, not so much like a blessing. The whole, you're going to have to survive with a sword. You're going to live in a place without where there are not very many animals for you to hunt. So he manipulated and maneuvered the situation in such a way that his brother had no choice but to take it. And now, Laban manipulated the situation so that Jacob also had to take it. Sowing and reaping. Now he had to serve another 7 years. Now, interestingly, the Bible does not say, and the year number 8 all the way to year number 14 were also like a few days because of his love for Rachel. We don't read that anymore. This next 7 years, according to a lot of commentaries or a lot of devotionals, this next 7 years were probably filled with suspicion, resentment, bitterness, and it wasn't a joyful 7 more years. The first 7 years were joyful. The next 7 years were very painful years. And that is also why in verse 31 we see, when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Why would Jacob hate Leah? Well, most probably because Leah was never his first choice. That's probably one very reasonable conclusion to make or assumption to make. But it's also very probable because that Leah may have reminded him of the treachery and the manipulation and the deception that Laban had committed against him. which would also remind him of his own treachery that he committed against his own older brother, Esau. And so it's like a double, he's reminded of being sinned against. At the same time, he's reminded of his guilt of him sinning against his older brother. So it's like a double whammy kind of thing. So this is like the irony that we see in this chapter. And you know what, guys? It's not going to end here. We're going to see even more manipulation in the coming texts, okay? So if we're to summarize this whole chapter, or not whole chapter, but this text today, we can have a few pointers to go home with. First, we must beware and be vigilant of people who exaggerate, who make these grandiose gestures, like, surely you're bone, and, you're my bone and my flesh, things like that, who do things for show, who crave the spotlight, who shower us with gifts and praises and compliments, who try to impress us, who try to gain our sympathy, or who play victim. All right, these are people we have to be very, very careful of. Again, the Pharisees who enjoyed doing this, they pretended and they wore masks. All right, second lesson. Never allow good intentions or your love for others to blind you or to make you naive. Jesus still tells us to be wise as serpents, yet innocent as doves. Never flip it and become wise as doves, which makes us kind of dumb, and innocent as serpents, which makes us guilty. All right, so don't flip that. We still have to stay wise. We shouldn't be naive. All right, that's not a good testimony for the people of the world to see among Christians. Third, we must learn to differentiate patient love from impatient lust. And remember, we talked about this before. When it comes to lust, especially for men, it's 3 G's: gold, glory, and girls. Therefore, when it comes to lust, it's not only physical lust, okay? It's not only sexual temptation to fornicate, but it's actually lust for pleasure, lust for power, and lust for profit. Gold, glory, and girls. Okay, that's the biggest top 3 temptations for men. Number 4, never underestimate God's way of delivering discipline or justice. Never take God's place as the discipliner or the judge. We must leave it up to God. We must say, God, you are sovereign. We are not. We are not the avengers. We are not the judge. We are not the discipliners. So we leave it up to you. The most we do is obey your word, follow your word, and do the things that we see in Scripture that are clear principles on how to handle things in our lives. And lastly, God will not be mocked. What we sow, we will reap. I know that text is in the New Testament, but it's unavoidable that we see that theme so blatantly obvious in this text. That, Jacob sowed deception, manipulation, trickery, and treachery. And in the end, he reaped what he sowed. He was deceived, he was manipulated, and he was betrayed. And just as his older brother had to swallow the sin committed against him, Jacob had to swallow the sin committed against him. And just as his brother will have to suffer years and years of pain, Jacob also served 14 years of labor and hard work. And, in fact, it was bitter and painful as well for him. And so we see that God is in control of all things, and God has a way in his sovereignty. God has a way of redeeming and judging and disciplining. So we must trust in the Lord for all those things. There are persecutions happening left and right, especially today. We see a lot of pastors being silenced, not being allowed to preach the gospel. We see street preachers now being mocked and persecuted even more now compared to before. We see all these anti-Christian movements, the woke mentality, the critical race mentality, all those are coming down on Christendom. And John MacArthur rightly says we must prepare for the persecution that's going to come against us, against Christians. There's going to be fiercer and fiercer persecution. Jeff Durbin also preached about this, that we must prepare one another for the coming persecution. And in that preparation, we must also prepare our hearts to settle it in our hearts that we will not try to take vengeance against those who persecute us for our faith, but rather we pray for them and we allow God's sovereignty to take place. As for us, as Christians, our call is to continue to serve God, preach the gospel, reach out to the lost, tell them about Jesus Christ and the cross of Christ, and hope and pray that they get to know the grace of God the way we have. Let's pray.